All right, so we're week 13, and this week is all about networking. Okay, we've referred to some of this stuff in different levels, and we're gonna just dive in. Now, the stuff on your screen may not be all the stuff that we get to. This is very organic, as you know, and there's live chat. Come join us on Twitch. If you want to contribute, whether because you know it or you want to learn it, you can come on in and check it out. A couple of things I want to say. So, some of you might be networking can be boring. This is something that is. I remember when I used to mentor people like in person, it was something particularly young people had a very hard time keeping them interested in it. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to like learn networking from a hacker perspective because that makes it a little bit more fun. And frankly, knowing about networking and how it works and how to find machines, how to get to those machines, how to see what vulnerabilities they have, networking is front and center in the middle of those skills. It is the base foundation of pretty much all web fronting, web internet based hacking. If you don't know networking, forget about any other hacking at all because this is how not only do you discover targets, but it's also how you can figure out what they're running, how to profile them, and all that jazz. So even though we're not going to go deeply into that, we are going to take an approach to networking as if we were teaching you how to hack. So that'll make it more fun. And based on that, by the way, I want to start with just a quick little story. So the first two people that I ever mentored at SKILSTAK in 2013, they were recommended by a guy who was in the tech industry, and he recommended his kids come, and so he and his buddy's kid came, and I taught them the stuff that we're gonna do today, and how to discover something, how to infer what the service is, how to try to access the service in different ways. And we went on a little field trip to my neighbors, who I knew, coffee shop, and Gabby was her name. And we went there, and I said, okay, we're gonna go on a little field trip. We're gonna go over to the coffee shop and see if you can hack into the network. And these kids had just learned these skills, like just like spent an hour learning it. And but I told them, I said, look, don't hack, Gabby. She's a friend, and we're not gonna hack her. But if we're just gonna go over there. So we went over there, and they sat at the table, and I went up to just talk with her while they did their thing, and they did the discovery and stuff I'm going to show you today. And then um, one of the kids, I'll never forget, he goes, Mr. Rob, and he flips his laptop around. Thank God there was nobody else in the room. He flips his laptop around and he goes, I got it, I'm in. I'm like, what? And what he had done is he had nmapped the whole network, identified the router, uh, scanned the router to see what was listening, identified a web service that was listening, accessed the web service with a graphic web browser, saw that it was prompting him for the admin password for the router, Googled the default password for that particular router style, and entered the password. And he had opened up the administrator page to the router, and I went, Gabby, what's up with your security? You have no security. Who set this up for you? Goes, well, I had some guy, he just set it up for me, and I'm like, you need to change the default admin password. Oh my gosh. And he goes, well, I don't know these things. So I was blown away because I didn't teach him to do all that. I just showed him how to scan and stuff and how to discover things, and he put all the other pieces together and did it. And he and his buddy, and I was like, I was super impressed. I was also terrified because with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm like, I mean, you know what? We helped her, and then after that, it became a thing that we always did. We would go on field trips all over the place. We would go to Panera Bread, and another person hacked the sleep center next to us. They had their Wi-Fi, and they hacked them, and they went in to tell them about it. So by the way, if anything that we're learning today from this hacker perspective, right? If you actually get to the point where you can scan and hack somebody because it's just so stinking easy because they're not changing the pattern for passwords and stuff. I'm just going to tell you a couple things before I tell you this because otherwise you're not going to listen to me. If you go to that person and you say, "Hey, I hacked you. You want me to help you fix it?" It's like being a mob boss saying, "Do you want protection money?" And so I'm telling you, don't do it. Okay, I'm not saying don't do it and don't test people's walls and stuff depending on what the laws are. But what I do want to tell you is that this is a very, very common misconception in young hackers in particular. They think that the people that they've hacked are going to be grateful. They think that they're going to go up to them and they're going to say, "Hey, I hacked you. I'm going to fix you. I just want to let you know, right? Because as a service, I want to let you know you probably need to change your admin password." And they think that they're going to be received with open arms, like, "Thank you very much. Oh gosh, thank you for showing us. Yeah, we'll be sure to get right on it." And that is not the average response in my experience. The average response is they're embarrassed, they're scared, they don't know why you're doing it, they don't have the means to stop it, they don't know what your agenda is, and you might end up actually getting in more trouble than you think by being a nice person. Because you'll go in there and you'll say, "Hey, I'm just going to help you out here." And then they'll like, "I didn't ask you to do that. Why are you doing that?" And if you want a fun story, read about Randall Schwartz. Randall Schwartz in 1997, 6, 7, something like that. He was actually working for Intel and wasn't networking, but he ran crack on the passwords file, which was not part of his job contract, and he gave the cracked passwords to his manager and said, "You might want to have these people change their passwords." They sued him, they kicked him out, they took him to and they convicted him. They convicted him of hacking in court, and he spent almost all his money trying to educate the. It's a pretty famous story, and he thought he was doing the right thing, and he was not told to do it, and he volunteered the information as a bonus service while he was being paid to do other work, and they took him to court and won. And he had to do community service for like 2 years or something. So just be really careful on this thing. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's just go on. So we have to talk about what Ethernet is, right? So you can probably do a search on the internet. So let's ask Chat GPT about that. What is Ethernet? We're going to ask Chat GPT. We set this up last week. If you don't want to set yours up because you don't want to pay or whatever. Ethernet is the standard for wireless local networks. Local area network, that's the thing you're going to hear a lot. In fact, let's actually add that to our notes. Let's call it, we'll call it, say, LAN and WAN. So when someone says LAN, they mean local area network. So your house is your local area network, okay? And then they have wide area networks. That would be like the internet. All right. Now the internet actually, if you don't know what the internet is, let's do a little bit of a history lesson, basic history, okay? And you can do the search for it, or I can show you. But I'm going to give you my summary. So the Ethernet started a long time ago when the military, if you actually want to watch a really great documentary on this, let me show you. You can go to YouTube. My weird choices here. You can see Nerds 3 point, is it 2.0? 2.0.1, there we go. All right, so networking for nerds. So if you really want to get into this, and you should, this is some good extra credit, I suppose. Part 3, here we go. Brief history of the internet, Nerds 2.01. Oh, yeah, this is the whole thing. So I already talked to you about Nerds, Revenge of the Nerds, where Robert Cringely talks about how computers were formed and where they came from. So if you want to be informed and you want to, it's very entertaining. This one is particularly boring. There is a segment in this, and it's not suitable for Twitch because they go through and they actually interview a porn star because porn was one of the primary drivers for the internet adoption, believe it or not. So, and they talk about how network bandwidth improved because of it and everything. It's kind of interesting. But I'm going to put this video in here, this video link, in so that you can go find that if you want to watch it. But that, if you really want to get into the deep history of the internets and in kind of a fun way, go watch that. All right. So the boring answer is that a bunch of military people from DARPANET were paid to connect universities up, and the universities were getting money. They were getting funding from the government, so they were eventually forced to network. They wouldn't have done it on their own. And the government, because they were giving them money, they forced them to create the first network that connected two universities, 2 or 3 universities. And that's where everything came from on that. And uh, when we get into usernames and stuff, you'll get it. So something you may have already noticed, you know how when we start up a shell already, you see here you got your username, right? And it says at, and then it has a host name, right? Right. When we get into Etsy host, we'll talk about it. But this is the origin of email, in case you're wondering. That's where email actually comes from. And so these usernames, the way that they allowed it to send messages between two machines is they would make these domains, and then that would route the email to the right machine. And so that's the origin of email addresses. And people see that and like, hey, that looks like an email address. Well, that's where it came from. All right, so let's go back. And so the history is they needed to connect them all, and they needed some way to communicate data to all of these different things. So let's go back to our definition of Ethernet. I'm sure it's going to say better than mine. Ethernet is a standard for worldwide local area networks. It allows devices to communicate with each other over a network. It uses systems of cables and connectors to transmit speed. Device Ethernet operates at a different speed ranging from 10 megabits to 100 gigabits per second or more. So let's talk about megabits and gigabits. Okay, first of all, there's a difference between megabits and megabytes, right? So megabits are ones and zeros, and a bit is a 1 and a 0. And this is usually where I just watched Tron this week. There's a really good segment. I won't waste our time on Tron, but there's a yes and a no, right? That's a bit, and we're gonna get into that next week or sometime soon when we talk about octal and permissions and bases and all of that. But so that's what a bit is. A byte, for now, all you need to know is a byte is 8 of those, right? Byte, B-Y-T-E is 8. So when we talk about network, this is a really common mistake beginners make all the time, so I definitely want to mention this. You see this is Mbps, so that's megabits. And whenever you're talking about networking, you're talking in megabits. Let me give you an example. So when I am IRL streaming, like from my rig, right? The optimal streaming bandwidth is 6,000 megabits per second. That gets you really great, that's something you can see pretty well. It refreshes the screen well and everything. And so you can kind of coordinate the quality of your stream based on how many megabits per second you're pushing. And so one of the really cool things about IRL streaming is that you can bond 3 modems together so that if each one does from like 200 to 1,000 megabits, which by itself would not be very good, you can combine those 3 together and get like 3,000 or 4,000 megabits. And I did a 7-hour IRL stream last night while I was, biking around the booty loop and did my first fixie ride on a bike. It was really fun. You should go watch it if you care about that stuff. But there was, the quality of the stream is indicated by how much bandwidth you can push. So bandwidth is how much data is going over that wire. And the wire technically is Ethernet. Sometimes it's not a wire at all. Sometimes it's a filament of, in fact, more frequently than not, it's a filament of glass that is transmitting light. Like literally light blinks across. It's absolutely amazing if you think about it. I mean, if you look at some of the cabling over the world, the Ethernet cables that I mean the massive ones, right? That they have to service with submarines and stuff that cross the Atlantic. In fact, you could probably go look at a map of this. Let's go look at this. Let's say I actually gave a tour to a bunch of Russians of America for AT&T of the big ships that lay these cable. Maps of Ethernet, of internet backbone. I wonder if we can find one. I wonder if there is one. So here we go. So this is how the internet works. I'm trying to find one. That's a network. Here we go. So here's how all of these cables go. And just young people still know what email is. Good question. So here's how everything's connected. Now, you might be wondering, well, what about satellites and all that jazz and Wi-Fi? Well, that's true. It's still 1 and 0, but it's it's flying through the air, right? And there are satellite systems where the stuff goes all the way up to a satellite and bounces back to Earth, but that takes a long time. In fact, if you've ever watched a streamer using Starlink, you'll see that they have a tremendous amount of lag compared to somebody who's streaming from Japan using the Ethernet only, and they may have only like a half second or a second of lag. So, light is pretty damn fast. The fact that you can even play a video game of any kind with somebody in Japan from the United States. I mean, you guys have heard about this, right? A lot of your first experience with internet networking and routing and latency, latency is the amount of time it takes for something to go, has been somebody you'll say, "Hey dude, what's your ping?" right? And a ping, technically, that's kind of the wrong use of the term. But when you're like playing, I remember playing Quake back in the day, and it was like, oh man, I got like a 400 ping. This sucks. My rockets are like totally off, and I'd have to lead my shots more and everything, right? But for a lot of people, I imagine that's their first experience with actual Ethernet, latency, packet routing, and all that stuff that we're going to be talking about. So, and that's what it is. It's like latency is how long does it take for it to get to you? Well, obviously, it's not just going to go straight between you and that person. This is where we get to talk about routing and the layers of the internet and stuff like that. So, before I mean, usually if you talk about networking in a formal capacity, they're going to hit you with the 7 layers of networking and all that stuff right away. And I'm going to save you from that for now by just kind of summarizing, like if you're playing a game, what's happening, right? So let's say you're playing, you're either accessing a web page. A web page is a little bit different because the content these days, they use something called a content delivery network, which will put the content that your web page that you look at, it's actually been moved closer to you. And so there's a copy of it that's being stored on a caching server somewhere near you so that you don't have to wait, any extra milliseconds to get that content. So it kind of complicates the idea. So we're going to talk about it in terms of gaming, because gaming can never do that. There's no way it can cache that. That packet has to get all the way through. So let's talk about that. So let's say you're playing a game over here and you're joining a server and you have a bunch of people from Australia or Asia or something, and you're all on the same server, right? Now, a lot of times the servers, in that case, you have to pick a server, right? Is your server going to be located in a data center over here or someplace, right? But wherever the distance between you and that server is going to tell you how long it takes. So how does Ethernet work? And this is something I don't know if I want to have any kind of visual here, but we'll just leave this visual up. So Ethernet can be thought of as email. It's like, or even slower mail, right? So, but it's happening at the speed of light, and it's way, way, way faster. So if you slow it all down, you'd have all of the data on the internet is communicated over packets. They're packets. Now, a packet is like what it sounds like. So there's going to be a lot of like mail metaphors, like snail mail, which I don't even know how relevant that is to kids today. I mean, because to anyone, because nobody uses postal mail anymore. We used to call it snail mail, and the postal service says don't call it that anymore. So I'm not going to call snail mail. I'm going to call it postal mail. But like if you're sending a letter to somebody, I mean, think about what you do there, right? You take a letter and you fill something in. I mean, there are a lot of direct parallels between this process and what the internet does at light speed. So you take a letter, you write the letter, right? You put some content. That's not part of the system. You already have the content written, right? But then you hand it off to the mail system. Well, the mail system begins with you putting that letter or whatever inside, or package if you want, if it's a bigger thing, inside of the envelope, right? And it's even called an envelope a lot of times in the container world. I mean, in the network world, and it's put inside of there, and then that envelope has got on the envelope is that you write some stuff on the envelope, right? What do you write on there? Well, you write where it's going to go, right? You write its final destination. Like, this is exactly where I want to go. This is the address, and this is the name, and I want it to go there. And you pay your money, right? You put your stamp on there. I know nobody. Raise your hand if you've even sent one of these things within the last 5 years. I haven't, but that's what you would do, right? Normally, you just drop stuff off at UPS these days. But anyway, so and then what? What else is on your envelope, right? Or your package from Amazon or whatever. There's the return address, right? So there's that address that says, hey, this is where it came from. If anything goes wrong, make sure that it goes back to this person or this person knows about it, right? And so that is exactly what happens. Now, I actually used to be a mailroom employee for a bank a long time ago, and we dealt with tens of thousands of letters every day. So let's talk about what happens with that snail mail, with those letters after you leave, because this, believe it or not, this is exactly how the internet works. So that when you go, so in our case, we would take all of those letters in one. We had five. If we had a deadline, we had to be at the post office by 4 or 5 o'clock at night, and we had to take all of those letters, right? And we had to take them there, and we drop them off at the postal service, and it was actually called the postal routing, whatever connection place, and we would put it there, and then all of those letters. So even though every one of those letters was going to a different place. And we did that. We did something called pre-sorting, right? So I was like a little network router. I kid you not, I would put my headphones on, and I'd sit there and I would sort letters into the different places that they went, by zip code, right? By zip code. I'd put them in the different places they would go. And then we would take out a whole tub of letters that were going to that place. And we put all those letters were going to this particular place, and all these other ones are going to this different place. But now we need to take them to the next hop, because obviously we couldn't take them even, across the country or whatever. We had to take them to a router, a postal router service. So we took all of those to the post office, and those go to the post office. And because they were already pre-sorted, they could say, okay, all of these now go over here. Okay, and now these all go. So when I'm talking about this, I want you to think about just that one package, that one letter, right? What's happening to it? It's getting routed, right? So the first route it gets people I decided it needs to go over, with this group over here, and that got arranged, and then we go to the post office, and then all of those go to a specific place, and then who knows what happens after that. Right. And that's something that I want you to understand, because that is a very real part of this. So I'm going to take a gamble here. I'm going to try to do Traceroute. Traceroute or tracepath is a tool that's been around for a long time. We're just going to traceroute to, it's going to hand over some of my information, but that's okay. And this is going to try to trace all of the different hops, or the different post offices, if you will, between my actual computer, and google.com, wherever that is, right? So if you have you can run this. Tracepath is a program that's automatically installed, and you can see that it's not getting replies from some of the hops because they've been hidden from us. But basically, this is showing us all of the hops between here and that particular service, right? It's also doxing my IP, but I don't care because I'm secure here. I'm fine. So people already know where I live, so that's not a thing. Wow, I feel like they've got a traceroute problem here going on. Yeah, I kind of want to let it run for it to go through the whole thing, but you can do that yourself. Let's try another IP. Let's try something else. So let's try. In Windows has pathping. Did not know that. I'm going to add that to my stuff. I'm going to add that to my stuff. So yeah, let's do tracepath. There's also, you might have this instead. Traceroute used to be the older kind of version of it, and apparently, according to Mark, Windows has pathping. And let's talk about what that's actually doing. But let's do it some more. It's kind of fun. So skillstack.io. So here's that. This one probably will go faster, I'm hoping. I don't know. It's just hosted by GitHub, so we'll see TraceRT in Windows. Yeah. Well, we're not doing Windows, but sometimes we are covering a few of these things for Windows as well. And down here when we get to ipconfig, we'll talk more about that. But yeah. So, gosh, we got a lot of like circular routing going on. Either that or there's the I don't know. I'm glad you're getting to see this though, because this is kind of one of the problems with one of the network routing protocols, uh, MTR. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it might be. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be making it. Yeah, should we try Traceroute and see? Yeah, well, upstreams are always hidden. So this is going to be relevant. You're like, well, what is this here? This is a domain name. Yep, and it's like telling you this the time frame, and you get this number here. This is an IP address. We're gonna break these all down. Give me a second. Too many hops. I actually think it's doing some sort of circular routing there. Yeah. Yeah, I think it has some circular dependencies here. And this has been a problem with Traceroute for a while now, particularly when it hits the internet, because it'll get out here and sometimes the routing will get, just like if you had, a bad address, right? It's like it sends back to sender. Has anybody ever had one of these, by the way? Have you ever got a piece of actual, where an actual like piece of mail that has been wrongly addressed and then it bounces around and it keeps getting labeled return to sender, it can't find sender, and it just keeps getting bounced around. It finally gets to you and like the edges are tattered and it's partially ripped or everything. Um, what's MTR? What's MTR? I don't know MTR. I haven't used it. Should I know it? Massive Transit Relay. I don't think that's it. Oh, Matt's Traceroute. I did not know about this. I did not know about this. You're teaching me a new tool that I didn't. This is why I do this, everybody. Because there's always somebody who knows more than me. It's not hard. Only one customs. MTR. How do we install MTR? Can I just install it? How does it install? Let's go see if we can get this. This would be cool if I have a new tool to play with. Is it an apt-get? It's just an apt-get? Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, you guys are making me very happy. You should know how to do all this already. We did it already. Sudo apt install MTR. It's not more. Every time I see that, I think about the French mot de rire. You guys know about that? I forgot. Hey, I have a new fun thing to show you. I gotta put my screen keys back on. I don't know why they're not working right now. Screen keys dies all the time. Yeah, it's very sad. I'm very sad. I'm gonna start it back up again so you can see. I'm doing this so you can see my password. See, up at the top right there. See that? All right. На русском написал что? Mot de rire. You think it was already there? Apparently it wasn't there. Let's try MTR SKILSTAK.io. Whoa! It's graphical. It's a graphical thing. My traceroute. There's an MTR-tiny. I've never seen this before. You win the prize for coolness. Wow, it's still like doing it. 0% loss. It's just sitting here sending packets. Oh my goodness gracious. That is so cool. Hey, there's my IP. Wow. Wow. MTR-tiny is for the console. I am DDoSing. I am right now. Denial of service. I'm spamming it. This is cool. Quit. All right. Wait. Let's do tiny. Wait, how do I do that? -tiny? Yeah. Do I actually have to run it with -tiny? That's lame. MTR. Wait, is that gonna kill my other one? Is that gonna kill it? It does. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Look at that, how fun that is. Look at how fun that is. It's like I'm losing packets here. Where is it losing packets? Right here? I had no idea. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so anyway, there's lots of stuff here. It's sending out packets. What kind of packet? Well, we're going to get there. Yes, it's sending out a very specific type of packet. ICMP, you got it. So let's talk about that for a second, okay? While I'm DDoSing. So, okay, let's go back to the postal thing. So each one of these hops, so gateway, the gateway, that is the first hop. And then believe it or not, that is the mailroom, right? The mailroom is part of the organization. In our case, the mailroom is right there. See the thing with the blinky light in the back behind me? That is my router. That is, and you have one too. These days, there's usually something. It's usually going to go to router, internal router, and then it's going to go out to the modem, which also has a router on it these days. And then it goes up to your internet provider, and this is left over from Roadrunner.com. Spectrum, my internet service provider, bought out Roadrunner, so that's what that is. And then it goes up to NetOps Charter. So these ones here are the big backbones of the internet. This is where all the money is, right? These big providers actually do the routing at the highest level, and they're super efficient, obviously. And then it'll get to the organization. And I have a feeling that this is an IP address that belongs to Google. We might be able to actually check that. Let's go try that. Did you guys catch that one? The name, it's named lag. They introduce lag. Yes, they absolutely do. So as you could see there were things that had names and some things didn't. So they had numbers. Let's just jump right into that. So using our comparison to an envelope, the actual address. So first of all, let's talk about routing. I need to go back. I'm sorry. We're going to do the name thing. Well, should we do the domain name stuff now, or should we jump right in? Let's just do it, because you're like, what's up with the names, right? So this is actually way down here, but we're going to talk about it. So bottom line, everything on this big worldwide internet has an IP address. And if you're wondering if the world is ever going to run out of IP addresses, the answer is yes. In fact, it's for over a decade now. There have been two different ways to number things on the internet. There's the old legacy version with IP addresses, and then there's a new thing that you'll hear about called IPv6. And why do you care? Because you're inevitably going to see IPv6. You don't really, as a beginner, you don't really have to get into the details of it, other than to know that an IP address is a limited small number by comparison, and IPv6 is such a big number that I'm not even kidding. It could literally give an IP address to every grain of sand on planet Earth, and it would still have more of them. And yeah. And people are talking about, in the chat, they're talking about the difficulty between memorizing IPv4 and IPv6. IPv6 they're very long numbers, and they're numbers that are represented in ways that don't even look like numbers, as opposed to IP addresses. And I'm stopping myself right there, because if I go too much farther, we're going to be talking about bitwise mathematics and binary and base 2 and all of that stuff, which I promise we're going to get to. But for right now, you just need to know that's the address, right? So on the envelope, let's go back to our simple comparison. On the envelope, you have an address, right? And when you send it to the post office or even the mailroom, the only thing they care about in the mailroom is the zip code, right? So they look at the zip code and they go, oh, this goes into this pile over here, right? And then when that batch of letters goes to the post office, they say, oh, these all go to the same zip code. Okay. And they put it on a truck, and then that truck goes to that particular zip code. But it doesn't go there immediately. Probably sometimes it might go to some sort of intermediary kind of router, right? And that's what we saw. That's what we saw. Let's do it again. But we saw a bunch of so these are kind of the equivalent. Oh, look, that one hit Google already. That's nice. So here you can see these are kind of like the intermediary laggy things that are, in the middle. These are kind of like the distribution points. And if you want to find a distribution point like this in real life, by the way, a lot of times they're located near really huge highway exits. And in fact, there's one that I actually walked around. I drank a 40 out and does anybody remember that video? There's a huge distribution hub near a place where I went to go get my bike rack installed. And so I just started walking around, and it was really fun because we found there's like, you've seen these things, right? They've got semis pulling into them all the time and all that stuff. There's these huge distribution hubs, and they're very industrial, right? So the bottom line is stuff goes there before it even knows where it's going. We know that it needs to be in the region, and then it needs to go to another region and another region, and pretty soon it gets to, the local UPS truck or the local postal service, and then eventually that comes down to your house, and you put it on your front door, or it gets delivered or whatever. So I hate to really belabor this idea of hops and routing and email and actual mail, but it's really important because that is exactly the same thing. So, but here's something interesting. Okay, how on earth would we know to take that back to that one piece of letter, that one letter, right? Let's talk about that letter. We're talking about that one letter. That one letter needs to get all the way to here, right? The 8 number hop. And that is the destination address that's on the email. That's the address. Send it to, so-and-so at this place, right? Nowhere on that envelope does it say, but first send it to the mailroom and then send it to the other thing and then send it to the other thing. So what I want you to imagine in order to understand this is imagine that letter, every time it gets sent someplace, that it gets stamped. So let's say, just imagine, just for the sake of memory, turn that letter around and pretend that every time it's getting sent to a different hop on its path, it's being stamped. And every time it gets stamped, that it gets stamped with the address. Pretend like somebody wrote an address. So let's say you send the mail, you send it, you have your envelope. Maybe you're working for a big organization, and the person picks it up to take it to the mailroom, right? Well, when that person picks it up, they can say right away that that's not going to go, it's not inter-office mail, right? It's not inter-office mail. It's not going to go to somebody else's desk inside of your company, your building. It's going to go to the mailroom because it needs to go out of the organization. Believe me, there's direct corollaries to all of this in actual networking, right? So it's not a local thing. It's an external. It's a wide area thing. You get where I'm going with this? A local area network would be everything inside of that organization, right? Depending on the size of the organization, which can get really crazy, and you can make a lot of money setting up networking just for organizations. But the person who picks your mail up in this imaginary scenario, they're like, okay, the first decision that's made is, does this go to the mailroom or does this go to somebody else? And if it goes to the mailroom, what do? They stamp mailroom on there, right? And maybe even the actual address of the mailroom. This is mailroom on the first floor, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you have 2 mailrooms, right? So there's an address that's written on there, stamped on there. Go to the mailroom. If it's not that, it's like, oh, well, this needs to go to, floor 20 of our building and in cubicle C, right? And, or no, floor 20, but maybe that's it. We just need to go to floor 20, and then whoever is on floor 20, handing out these things can take it to that person if it's internal. So they stamp floor 20 on the back, and the front of it says floor 20 cubicle C, and the name and everything. So then that person gets it, and then they see it, and they go, oh, that's 420. And then they go, oh, hey, I know who that goes to. And they go to the cubicle And they could even maybe stamp it with a cubicle, and then they hand it to somebody else, and then they take it to the cubicle, and then finally the email lands in the inbox of that person locally. But the ones that went to the mailroom, they go all the way to the mailroom. The mailroom gets them, and the mailroom is like, okay. It looks at the front, it looks at the zip code, and it's like, you need to go to this distribution point. So the back, it crosses out the stamp on the back of the letter, and it stamps it with the address of the next hop. It stamps it with the address of the next hop, and you can imagine this being that address, right? It's like, okay, now you go to this organization. It's like, I don't know where it goes after that, but that organization, whatever it is, that postal service or whatever, they know what to do with your. I've been told that they know what to do with all the stuff that goes to this particular zip code or this particular country or whatever, right? So then it goes there, and then they get a hold of it, and then they cross the stamp out, and they go, oh, all this stuff goes to distribution point C, at this address in, Arizona. It has nothing to even do with the final destination. That's the next hop because it needs to get on the airplane or something. Maybe they know what has to happen to that mail. So they stamp an address that doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, why is this address on there? Right? Because the address on the front of the envelope says it's going to go completely to this other place. But the person who's doing the routing or the organization, they know that it has to go over here so we can get on the airplane, and they can go over here, and they can go on a satellite, and they can go over here. And every time, I'm belaboring this point because it's so important that you get this. So every single time that envelope changes hands along the way, the old address, the next hop address, we'll call it, right? The next hop address gets erased or crossed out, and another stamp gets put on there, right? And you can imagine the back of that envelope depending on how long it has to go, it could have quite a few, like crossed out addresses, right? And now, so the really interesting thing about this is it says a direct correlation to TCP/IP. And in the old days, nobody supports this anymore. It's too much effort to do this. But the TCP/IP packet protocol, which is exactly the same, it's like a digital envelope, right? It has the content, it has the addresses that we're talking about, but they're just all in digital format, right? It actually used to support all of those crossed out addresses. It was like, and each packet would actually carry its path. It doesn't do that. They don't do that anymore. They haven't done that forever because it takes too much time to bother with doing that. But I want you to understand what they've decided is the only thing we really care about is what the next hop is. What is the next hop? What is the next hop? Okay. Now, that next hop has a very important, and we can call a switch in a router in this case, yes. So that next hop has an important name, and what I want to talk about this for a second. So the next hop is called an Ethernet address. Okay. So it's called an Ethernet address. Sometimes it's called a machine address, right? And you can actually look inside of a packet, and the packet only has that address for a very short time, right? And it's actually being changed as it goes. But what is the address that's not changing? The address that's not changing as it bounces around is the IP address on the front of the envelope, right? That says I need to go to here. So let's talk about what are those. Let's take our real world comparison and let's start to talk about what do the addresses actually look like. Well, you already kind of saw some of that, right? We were doing that IP thing, right? And so there's two kinds of addresses. I'm just going to do this really quick. So IPA. So this, don't worry, we're going to go through this, but this has got a lot of addresses, right? So this is what the addresses look like. All right. So this is a local area address, but that's fine. We'll talk about it later. So this here is an IP address, IPv4 address. And here you can see an IPv6 address. And like we talked about, it's as if there's two addresses on the front of the envelope because we have one for like if you had two different zip codes, let's say maybe, zip plus 4. It's kind of that actually. You guys know about zip plus 4 in America? So a zip is like, I think it's 8 characters, 8 digits. But if you want to get more precise, you can put dash whatever, whatever at the end. In a rough way, that's kind of like what IPv6 is. They wanted more precision. They wanted more ability to do things, and they're running out of addresses. So they went ahead and did that, right? The phone numbers, they did the same thing. They started running out of phone numbers, and now everybody has to do, three extra numbers that be the area code in order to keep there because we're running out of phone numbers. That's the idea behind IPv6. Now, as somebody said, this is ridiculously difficult to remember, so nobody remembers that. It's very hard, but it is important that you see that. So, and then you got issues with some old hardware not understanding IPv6 and some, so we don't open up that, can of worms right now, but that is a thing, right? So if your internet networking is not working at home, and we have an entire series about this for Home Lab Init, which was going to talk about setting up your own home lab. And, that would be one of the things to consider is making sure your internal home network is using IPv4 versus IPv6, just so you have enough of them. And this little number here is the mask. And we are not going to really talk about that. I don't know how much to go into with that. It's always so hard. So, yeah. So there we go. That's the basics of that. Let's talk about domain names for a second. So in addition to these numbers, you can also, for the sake of simplicity, you can give them a name to go with it. And when we use the internet, the World Wide Web, we're URLs and that kind of thing, we're always using the name. But for every single situation where there's something that has a name, there is an address underneath it, whether it's a v4 address or it's a v6 address. Every single one, every single name that you use on the internet has, it's just, how when they do like 1-800 call us now or something like that with the phone, right? That's the same idea. It's something for us humans to remember that can be changed to point to anything. And if you're a hacker, you can actually take over somebody's domain name and have it point to a completely different address and then sit there and, nefariously steal all of their traffic and pretend like you're them, right? And it happens all the time. In fact, some of the biggest hacks in history have been simply breaking the service, the registrar that says this person goes with this person. So let's talk about that. Yeah. So domain hijacking is called. Yeah. So how do you even know? So we're going to look at a few tools, starting with some ancient tools. I do want to say before we get into the discussion about tooling, that, here we already kind of encountered this. There are tools that are older that still work everywhere. There are tools that are newer that are cooler. So we're and there's tools that work similarly on Windows from some. This is one of the cases where we're actually going to talk about tools that will run from the command line on Windows, whether or not you have Gish Bash installed. This will run with just a basic CMD from Windows as well, right? So, because knowing how to get this information on any machine is very valuable. You can even do it on your phone. You can install apps on your phone that will give you, Traceroute, or that'll show your IP address currently and that kind of thing. I guess we probably should mention DHCP. We're just going to mention this. So this is called Dynamic Host Control Protocol. And the only thing you need to know about this, as a beginner, you're probably going to get hit with this, is that when your device comes on to the network, right? Unlike we use kind of an example with an actual piece of mail with an address on the front, right? But the problem with that analogy or that metaphor or whatever you want to call it is that it breaks down when you consider that that address is pointing to something that might move. So the way you can think about this is if a person were moving all the time, like maybe several times in the same day, right? Because imagine trying to give, an address to your phone. Your phone is on a different network all the time, right? It's, you go to this Wi-Fi and it automatically joins that Wi-Fi, right? And then it joins this Wi-Fi over here. It's the equivalent of having that person working in the organization, right? Trying to send inter-office mail, changing floors all the time. And you want to be able to get the message to them no matter where they are. And so at that point, things get a little bit confusing and complicated. And so then we start to see technologies come into play. And one of them is called Dynamic Host Control Protocol. And what that does is when your device is turned on, I'm seriously oversimplifying here, but when your device is turned on, it says, yo, I'm on this network here. What's up? Right? And it sends out this broadcast packet that everybody on the whole network sees, on that whole local area network, not the internet, but that local area network. Everybody says, hey, yo, I'm here. Can you help me out? And then it says, by the way, here is my hardware address. Here is my Ethernet address. This used to be that it was actually like soldered on, not as effectively soldered into the, the card that connects you to the internet. Your Ethernet cable plugs into that. It used to be that card, which is a NIC card, by the way. I used to get crap. Somebody said it's not NIC card. That's redundant. The C stands for card. That is not true. If anybody ever tells you that, you'll know right away they don't know what they're talking about with regard to networking. A NIC card, the C in NIC stands for Network Interface Controller. Okay? Network Interface Controller. Did I spell that right? No. Okay, that's what I call the card. And you can have a network interface controller in your phone that doesn't have a card. But in the old days, you used to have to buy it, and you'd stick it in your computer, and then you would plug a cable into it, right? And so MAC address, yeah. This is also known as, MAC address is probably the more common way to refer it. Ethernet address. These are all the same. They're all versions of the same name, right? And you'll see like Mac or whatever. So, and by the way, let's look back at our other stuff here. So, okay, so here we have, where is it? So here's the internet. That's the internet address, right? The IP. Don't worry about this yet. That's the mask. And then we have this. This is the IPv6 one. But here it says the link or the Ethernet address, and that is the MAC address, the machine address, whatever. This is effectively the hard-coded. And if when you look at it, if you say, "Damn, that looks a lot like the Internet v6 addresses," that's because it is. So when the Internet first came out and when Ethernet came out, the specification said we have a finite, and we need a lot more of these, hardware addresses, because every time somebody makes a device that's going to connect to the internet, we need to make sure that interface that connects to the network never changes, because we always have to be able to address to that specific place, right? And so in the old days, this was called a hardware address because there was a finite number of them, and they're still struggling with recycling these, right? You can actually, in 2023, you can easily change the non-changeable machine hardware address to whatever the hell you want. You can change it to whatever you want now. It's become kind of a problem, but the idea was that you can think of it as that was always going to be the hard-coded address of that interface, and that you would just throw it away, and eventually they would recoup the old ones and stuff like that. That's not how it turned out, actually. It turns out that they have made it so you can actually change that Ethernet address to whatever, because they realize that, depending on where your devices are, they may not necessarily need to be, uniquely identified. But that again, that is the never changing location of where you are. And it kind of compares to that return address on an envelope up in the top left, right? So that would show you where you were going. Yeah, and one of the best ways to attack a computer network is to tell the whole entire. Remember that thing where, okay, when you turn a device on, it sends. It's called an ARP packet. It sends a packet out to everybody. It's like, yo, I'm here. Give me an address, right? And the answer comes from somebody claiming to be the authority, which is supposed to be your router, right? And your router's like, I got you. Here's your new IP address. And it keeps track, that router keeps track of the IP address that has been assigned on that network for that non-changing hardware address, right? And so the device that asks the question is like, okay, fine. And so it writes it down and says, all right, I'm good, right? I know where to go, and this is my IP address. And there's two types of IP addresses. They're static and dynamic. So in the case where your device is asking, it's like, hey, can I have an IP address, please? And the router's like, yeah, okay, here you go. That's dynamic, right? And usually it gives it the same one every time. But if you wanted to always get the same one every time, you have to either do one of two things. You have to tell, it's called reserved DHCP, which is the same as static, except for it's controlled by the DHCP server. The DHCP server, or whatever your router, is usually the same thing. It will say, oh, you always want to give that same IP address to that specific Ethernet address, no matter what, when it broadcasts, and you do that, right? Well, what happens is, so somebody mentioned Ethernet spoofing as a hacker technique. What if I come into the room and I have my really evil device, and I turn my device on and I tell the whole world, hey, look at my MAC address, and that other computer is not there anymore. Maybe that other computer's turned off. Maybe it's on at the same time, right? If I am loud enough, I'm really paraphrasing here, but if I am loud enough, then the router's going to be like, oh, you're the one? Okay. And it will start to send those packets to that same, to the other one. And then you can intercept those packets. If you keep sending them on their way, that's what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. And this is just one of many forms of a man-in-the-middle attack. But a man-in-the-middle attack intercepts all the traffic. It's really fun to watch, actually. And it sends it along its way to its actual destination. So hopefully the person just sees it took a little bit more time. But the man in the middle, as they say, is sitting there writing all of those packets to a log file so that it can go back later and look at all those packets and run brute force attacks against the packets offline, so that nobody knows you're attacking. But that's if you're into security, that's a thing. There's also, in Kubernetes, another reason you might hear about this is a lot of times when we're dealing with devices, you can get what's called an ARP packet storm. So if the reason network engineers make so much money is because if they don't do this right, if they screw up the Ethernet addressing or DHCP or in some cases, the subnet masks and stuff like that, which we haven't got into, but if there's a million things network engineers can do wrong that can take down an entire network. And if you haven't if you haven't been a part of this, be grateful. But if you've ever been on a network where someone has created a packet storm, where there's routes that are circular, like we just saw, or there's any number of things. There's somewhere everybody's broadcasting their new addresses, and they're taking up all the bandwidth just by trying to tell everybody who they are. There's a million things that can break on a network. And as a beginner, at the beginner boost, you just need to know that is what's going on, right? That it's this communication stuff that's happening in Ethernet, and you know enough to know how that's happening and to dive deeper if you want to. It's just really hard for me. You saw that at a hospital in 2020? Yeah. So most people who have been around for a while have seen a network failure. And what's really interesting, if you ever happen to be a part of that and you're anywhere near a device that has a blinky light to show you your network, go check it out. Because it will go nuts. I mean, the problem with this is that these networks don't recover easily, because even though you can turn, unless you turn, sometimes unless you turn all the devices off and clear their cache, they're still going to try to route all those packets, right? So that actually is a really great segue into Sniffer's even more fun, yeah. So there's a lot of fun things here. Hopefully you can find those things to do. So one last piece about the networking, a couple pieces here. So the first one is port. So we talked about the address, right? But it's important to talk about port, and I like to use the term French. The French word for port means door. And so now you could kind of imagine, so imagine you have a house or a place of business, maybe, I don't know, a sandwich shop or a pub, right? And you have a front door where all of your customers come in who want a particular service. So I'm deliberately making these stories so that you'll remember them. And then you have a back door, right? Or maybe 3 doors, maybe a secret door. But that back door, what is the back door for? That's for the deliveries, right? So the back door of a pub, will say, provides a different service. Maybe you have a separate entrance just for VIPs who are going to be in the band if they're going to do your show in the pub or something, right? So you have a door for VIPs to bring their band equipment in, and then you have a door for deliveries, and you want both of those doors to work all the time, right? Because you don't want your band to not be able to come do their show because someone's, taking the trash out or whatever, and they block the other door. So you have 2 doors, right? And then you have the front door. You don't want the customers anywhere near any of that, right? And because they're going to come in the front door, and they got a bouncer on that door, and the bouncer's like, okay, you can come in, you can't come in. Yes, you're hot. You get to come in. You don't get to come in. That kind of thing. But so every time you think about ports, I want you to think about this pub analogy or something, because that is what they are. Each doorway, a port is a doorway to a specific service. And sometimes those doors have heavy security on them. Sometimes they have no security on them whatsoever. But every single time, there's always a running program associated with that door, right? So I don't know if you can make an analogy here, but there is something happening. There's, there's a receipt of packets, and then there's potentially, answering and sending packets out in a different way. But it's more or less going through that door. It's actually, the analogy kind of breaks down when you think about sending stuff out through the door. Stuff going out doesn't in the network world doesn't go through that door. It makes what's called an ephemeral port. So it's basically like it makes a port, an imaginary port, and sends it out through that so that it's not stopping the stuff coming in. You see what I'm saying? So the packets are always, the doors of our pub here are only inbound doors. And so our metaphor kind of falls apart, but for the most part, it's like stuff is coming into those doors. And if anything has to go out in the real world, to go out those doors, but in our imaginary world, in our world of networking, our router makes a port, or our service makes a port, and then sends that out. Now, that's going to be important because later on, when we start to look at the ports, and we're going to use tools like netstat. There's lots of tools for this, but we're going to start with netstat. You can start to see what's running. We could probably talk about nmap on this one too. All right, so let's actually look at all the stuff that's running. Developer, yeah, port 80 is the front door, and something else that's important to know is that I'm going to say let's say pub door analogy or metaphor. Is it an analogy or metaphor? Analogy, I guess. I don't know. So. We do have some reserved ports. All right. And why do you care about reserved ports? Because even as a beginner, you need to know that some ports have been permanently assigned specific purposes. Now, you can take over ports all the time. I have a quick story about this, but I want to show you after we've looked at some ports. So on Linux, you can look at those ports. You can do more or whatever. Etsy services, right? Remember I talked about a service providing services, right? So these are the port numbers as used over time from the beginning of time, right? And as I said, there's nothing that says that one of these door numbers has to be used for what it says. In fact, one of the greatest ways to hack or to hide a hack is to pretend you're something else, right? By making your program listen on a different port, as they say. So here's all the port numbers. You can go look at them. They go back a long ways. If they're not here, you can look them up on the internet. There's many places on the internet you can look them up. But each one of these services has a different purpose. There's one here that looks kind of familiar, huh? There's one. That one looks familiar, right? Every time you put HTTP in the front of a URL in your web browser, you used to be using this. You used to be using the World Wide Web, right? But you're not anymore. Nope, not anymore. If you are using port 80 these days, you're doing it wrong, because the security of that, there's no bouncer on that door, and then they added the bouncer to the door, and now the bouncer is like, oh, okay, so it's 443. So if your URL has HTTPS, it's going to this particular port. And this uses a secure socket layer TLS, which is another. These are encryption technologies. The only thing we're going to say about that is these are tunneled encryption technologies, which means that your web browser makes a connection with the web server, and they negotiate a way to encode everything that's traveling through there, and then all of the data that travels between there is secured because it's encrypted. Okay, so if you are not using HTTPS, you're doing it wrong. Now, these services, as you can see, we're not talking about packets anymore, right? Now we're talking about services. So I think that right now is probably the time to introduce the idea of the different layers of networking. And there has been raging debate since the dawn of time, internet time, about how to look at network layers. And there's like people say, no, you only need to use 4 layers. Some need 7 layers. Some need blah, 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 blah. And it can get very confusing. This is why I don't start with this. If I tried to make this, feel comfortable to people who need to understand things from a real world perspective. But if you were to go look here, you'll see any number of like this. If you're ever going to this is like the first thing they teach you if you're going to get network certified. But you see that there's all kinds of layers, right? Oh, hey, look at this one. This one has 4 layers. Wait, this one's got 5 layers. Wait, this one's got 7 layers. Oh no, whatever will I do? So there, I'm going to let you get into it. I really don't want to spend a lot of time here other than to identify where the layers match our analogy or our metaphor that we've been using, right? To the extent that you need to understand it as a beginner, okay? So let's go through it. We talked about the physical layer. Now that we have our thing to refer to, the physical layer, the plugging in of our cables, right? The physical layer in our analogy would be whatever system is in place for me to take that piece of mail and give it to the mailroom person on my floor, right? That process, that physical connection, that handoff of the envelope from my inbox to that other person, the act of that person and me, they constitute the physical layer. Now, this is where you can kind of throw like a pneumatic tube into the thing. If you've ever seen these old school pneumatic tubes, the pneumatic tube would be the equivalent of the physical layer of like, that's the thing that is transporting. And I mean, physical is even lower than that, right? And then the pneumatic tube is kind of like the data link layer. So in that case, the physical would be the actual tubes that connect the different floors, right? But the data link would be the thing that uses those pneumatic tubes to put that envelope into, one collection of things and sends it over that particular, system. That's the kind of thing. So you have Ethernet, PPP, switch, bridge. This is the data part. And then you have the part that breaks it up into packets. And those envelopes, so it's kind of I kind of lied when I said that there's just one envelope, right? Imagine there's different kinds of envelopes. So you have different envelopes. Sometimes you might have a bigger package. Sometimes you have an envelope that you want to put return address requested. You pay your extra $5, and you want to make sure it proves to you that they got it, right? You know those things, certified mail, right? So you have envelopes that are certified mail. You have envelopes, you have postcards that you don't care if anybody sees them. There's no security, and it can just get thrown away, and you don't care. You're like, oh, I hope it gets there. And then you have, even some other things that you might send through the mail just to check to see if the mail system even works, right? And so that correlates to all of the different types of envelope packets, all the different types of packets that you can send. And the differences between these types of packets, these envelopes, these packages, these things, the difference between them is the difference of protocol or network packet protocol. So now we can talk about the names of those protocols, right? So believe it or not, I mean, these two get crunched down sometimes. These two are kind of the same. So there's one packet. There's one packet. This. I know that our comparison is going to break down here because it's more complicated than that, right? But let's say everybody back in Zoom, yeah. And sometimes you get a really long letter, right? So it gets broken down into multiple envelopes. And it gets crazier because sometimes you can actually dynamically take one of those envelopes, split it in half, and then send both of them to the same person. And if the post office had the ability to do that, right? So our analogy is kind of breaking down here because there's a lot that goes on or that can go on. And then you have, hey, your thing is too big. It can't be sent in one packet, so I'm going to send it into multiple packets. So it breaks it up and sends it into multiple packets, right? And here we have IP, ICMP, IP, and just stick with IP and ICMP. ICMP is a packet that gets sent out, sometimes broadcast, and it says, send me back, where am I going? You don't need to care about that. But Traceroute that we just used, ping, you guys use ping, right? Let's use ping really quick. If you want to see if a host is up, right? So let's ping google.com or wherever, right? So you can see, so this is sending an ICMP packet. And yes, there are ping programs that you can force to use TCP/IP and UDP, which we'll talk about in a second. So here's our address, right? It tells you how long it took if you were playing Quake or Doom or whatever, or there's your ping time, right? That would be that's a pretty good ping time, right? Actually, no, that's the ping time right here. That's pretty damn good. That's really fast. Try to ping something that's farther away. If you want to know if your internet is on, if you want to know your internet is on, just do ping skillstak.io and you'll know right away if everything's working, because that'll tell you what the IP is, right? And if you think that there's something wrong with the service, the DNS, the domain name service, we're going to talk about that in a second, you can actually just ping the IP directly. If you want to do that, you can just do that and then just do that, and that'll get you. That does not do the extra lookup of the of that stuff. So we talked about ICMP and IP. IP is the sort of outer layer of the envelope that works for everything. It says, hey, go to this. That's the whole thing with the address, the Ethernet address, and stuff like that. And then we have end-to-end connections, TCP and UDP. So you may have actually heard about this. Most games, TCP stands for transfer. What does it stand for? Transfer commission protocol, or carrier protocol. I think it's a carrier or commission. I can't remember. What is TCP IP? How about that? Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna do SEO. So we're gonna talk about that. We're doing some different stuff right now. I'll talk to you later about those questions. A few people have some questions in the chat. We're asking ChatGPT what it thinks TCP/IP is. This is always fun. Yeah, there we go. TCP is a layer protocol because there's 4 layers. Oh, look, application, transport, internet, and network interface. So the network interface, that's the physical one. We talked about that. The internet layer handles the addressing of the data packets. The main one is the IP protocol. So that's the outer envelope, if you will. And then we have the inner envelope, which is that's kind of like, I want return receipt requested, or I don't care, I'm a postcard, right? So that's kind of like that. So pretend like you have an envelope, and inside of that envelope is is kind of the rules about whether it should be returned or not. And the fundamental difference between TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP is that TCP, every single packet that gets sent out is guaranteed to arrive. So if within a certain amount of time it doesn't make it, they'll try to send another one. So basically you can think of it this way. You send out the packet has to get all the way to its destination, and then when it gets to its destination, the receiver says, I got it, and it sends back a fin weight back to, not a fin weight, but it sends back a confirmation that it got the packet, right? So you're guaranteed that all the data from the packet, now that takes a lot longer, right? And then UDP, User Datagram Protocol, that says, basically it's the same thing. Can even have the similar data, but it gets sent to the final destination, and then it forgets about it. It's like, I don't even care if it makes it. And you're probably asking yourself, why would the internet have a protocol that does not care about getting a guaranteed message saying it made it? Can you think of a situation? Raise your hand. If you're a Twitch user, you probably already know. What is the situation? By the way, which one is slower? Latency is the magic word. Which one is slower? Can you imagine if every single piece of actual mail in the United States and in the world had to be return receipt, that you couldn't even open the letter and use it until you knew that it got received? TCP/IP is way slower, way slower, and I mean, and you'll see this. So, yeah. So if you go to this comparison of, like, return receipt requested, right? So let me ask you a question. Which one of these transport layer protocols would you rather have for playing a video game? So let's say every time you shoot or move or anything like that, you had to sit around and wait for the game server to answer you. You want UDP, right? So can you think, you guys don't have to be, game designers to think a little bit. How can you get around the fact that you're not sure that your packet made it? What's another way? Under what circumstance, I want you to think about this for a bit, because this is really important. Under what circumstance do you not care about making sure the thing made it or not? Why? What are some situations where you just wouldn't care? How about, you guys know the advertisement, can you hear me now? 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 Right? Or let's take it to another situation. Okay, what if I'm sending my GPS coordinates to somebody? Okay, I'm right here. Okay, now I'm here. Now I'm here. Now I'm here. Now I'm over here. Now I'm here. Now I'm here. And it's like, and if you were doing that in the real world and you had to wait for an answer, if it was like, okay, I'm here. All right, I see you're there. All right, I'm here. I see you're there. All right, I'm here. Oh, I see you're there. You see how that goes? I know I'm kind of belaboring this point, but it's really important you get it. So the reason that UDP is not a guaranteed protocol. So in order to get around, it's a lot faster though. So in order to get around this idea that I want to be sure the packet made it, the way you get around that is you create applications, and then we're going to get to the application layer, right? We get applications like games that don't care if the UDP packet died and fell on the floor. They don't care why, because they're going to get another UDP packet within nanoseconds that has exactly the same information that's been slightly updated. You ever been playing a game and all of a sudden you're like one spot and then you're like fast forward to the other spot? That's because all the packets necessary to get you from that spot, point A to point B, didn't make it for some reason. And all of a sudden it got new information. And depending on the game, sometimes you'll like do a little really fast, like super speed, like run over to that location. Sometimes you'll just pop over to that location. All right. So that when you see that happening, I want you to take a moment and say, I got this. I know what's happening. When you're talking about gaming or you're talking about web requests, right? If I'm going to go get a web page, that's not a UDP sort of thing, because I need to make sure that piece of that web page is received before I can go on and draw more of the web page. Otherwise, because I have no idea where it's going to be. So web applications, application layer protocol, HTTP, right? Web and mail, email, and things that require, legitimacy, those things are always TCP/IP. And you're probably asking, well, what happens if I don't ever get confirmation that the packet made it? Well, if you're going to get into operations, you regularly will see TCP/IP connections. So like somebody turned a computer off or something, right? And they only got half of it. And you'll see an TCP/IP connection that's stuck in the middle, that somebody cut it off and it's stuck in fin weight, they call it. And that's a pretty common network problem on a host, because after a certain amount of time, it'll time out and say, okay, fine, I didn't get any guarantee that this data is here, and it's not gonna, the IP stack of your computer is not gonna hand you that data until it gets it all. So it's kind of like holding it hostage. So your application might be hung or something. It might not work because it's waiting around to get this confirmation back, right? And it refuses to give you that data until I am sure that I got it the way you want. It doesn't like give you the data and say, hey, I'm still waiting for the answer to make sure this is the actual data. It doesn't do that. It doesn't even give it to the application until the application has had a full-blown communication cycle with the thing that it's talking to. Yeah. Yeah. If you want to, I mean, people have toyed with using UDP for web rendering and WebSockets games. Of course, they can use UDP over WebSockets. Streaming is very much a UDP thing. So, it's actually RTMP, which is a different protocol, but underneath the hood, it uses UDP for that kind of thing. So there are other protocols out there, but when you see those protocols now, as a beginner, where we're at. Okay. So at here, we have the applications, the sessions, like sockets, APIs, and then we have the application protocols, which kind of manifest as services. And that's what got us down this rabbit hole. We were talking about Etsy services that listens on port 80 and 443. So there's a thing that's listening for this particular type of application protocol. Now, the thing that's really cool about application protocols is most of the application protocols are understandable by humans. So like, believe it or not, when you send an email, the first thing on the first line is hi or hello. It says HELO. You can actually interact with a mail server by typing the protocol out. So the higher up, the takeaway from this is the higher up in the OSI model, big fancy thing, the more likely the human is going to be able to interact with it and they're going to be able to use it, right? And the application layer is the very highest. So hypertext transfer protocol. Hypertext is the act of clicking on text to make it jump to something. So hypertext transfer protocol, which sends these hypertext documents back and forth, request response kind of thing. That's the application layer at the very highest level. And you can see these things anytime if you want to see the higher level of this, you can turn on your developer tools, and you can see there's the document that was sent back and forth. But in hacking, you do this a lot, but you can go in and you can actually find the network link. There you go. And you can see all of the requests happening. Let's refresh this page. You can see all of those requests or those different addresses going in. You can see the status, which is defined by the HTTP protocol, how it was coming in, how long it took to get there. You can actually click on one and you can see the requests. The protocol for HTTP defines that everything has a header and a body. I'm just giving you an example of what an application layer protocol looks like compared to the Ethernet protocol. So this particular request that's got all of this text in it, it gets broken up into one or more packets, right? That get sent down here in the network layer. So the network layer and all the routers and everything, they don't care what's in the envelopes. Just like the postman doesn't care necessarily. They just want to know what the rules are about getting the envelope to where it needs to go. That's all they care about. And that's the point of the OSI model. The whole point of the model is, depending on where you are, you don't care about the stuff underneath. Do you think that the postman cares about the delivery trucks working? Yeah, when they're not working, but that would be the physical layer. right? Or the pneumatic system not working, right? So if your cable gets cut, well, I can't pick up, packets to deliver them. The postman doesn't care what's in the packets, but if you are somebody at the very high layer, maybe you're the executive who's in charge of the presentation, who wants the thing and wants to get the presentation within a certain amount of time and have it be a thing, that person at the highest level, they care about everything, because if any one of these things fails, they don't get their stuff, right? So if you're doing an Amazon order or something, all you care about is getting your stuff. You just want to make sure the whole system works. You don't care that there was a gas shortage and that that the deliveries at the airport didn't go through because it was too much money to refuel the plane or whatever. You don't care. You don't care that so and so, so that's the point. The point of the network layer model is that the layers of abstraction with regard to delivery of the next higher level of stuff is hidden from you. But knowing that it exists is super important, because now you know how everything works, and you can know where to go look when something might not work. So let's say your game's not working, right? And we're gonna, for the rest of this day, we're gonna spend the entire time learning all of the different tools. We learned some already, but we're gonna continue to learn all of the tools related to this, so that if you were trying to figure stuff out, you can kind of get a sense of it. Now, arguably, we're going to be doing things that I always use the example of a focused machine learning professional. They're not going to care about, right? But they might. I mean, maybe somebody who's about to do a machine learning presentation is wondering if their laptop is connected to the internet properly, or if maybe it's a problem with their VPN at work, and they're trying to decide if they even can get to their VPN, even though they don't trust the application. So being able to go to the terminal and run ping or traceroute or something will help you diagnose the problems with your network. So you can say confidently, oh, my network's not even connected. I need to call up my internet service provider, because I'm a remote worker. It has nothing to do with my place of employment. And so I believe having this information is super critical to any tech professional. If it just at a minimal level, so you can understand the problem, because then you can help diagnose the problem when you're talking to customer service, or you're setting it up, or you're trying to figure out whether you're logged into the Wi-Fi incorrectly, or any of those things. Okay, and not to mention security. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to take a quick break. You can go ahead and read this and look into it some more, and during the break. But I'm going to go ahead and stop. So pause. Here we're back. Before we get going, I just want to repeat the point about the importance of being able to diagnose your own network problems as a remote tech worker, which is pretty much becoming the standard. You need to know if your cable got cut, and you would see it, and then you can research it properly. When you call, customer service for your internet service provider, you want to be able to tell them the remediation things you've done. A lot of times you'll know more than the customer service person just by knowing how to ping or traceroute or something. So let's dive into some of these tools. We've already done all these different variations of traceroute. MTR is a new one we just found out. Thank you, LBG, for showing us that today. How to look up the MAC address, how to look up what my IP address even is, what is an IP address, that kind of stuff. What are the reserved services ports? We talked about that. How to look up all those ports and IDP and all of this. This stuff we should probably move up here. I'll rearrange it. Whois, should an IO, localhost, and stuff. All right, so let's just keep going. You already know traceroute to look up the different hops. Just know that doesn't always work, obviously, right? A lot of times for security purposes, the ICMP protocol that's used, that's an application layer protocol. Actually, no, I think it's what layer is ICMP at? They have it at network layer. Okay, so the network layer protocol to tell whether you're up or not. The only other tool that uses that is something called ping. So ping sends an ICMP packet to the target and bounces it back, and it counts how long it takes, right? And if you were to look at this envelope, the packet, it looks quite a bit different than TCP or the UDP packets, right? The outer IP packet is largely the same, but the internal stuff is actually, I think if I remember, that's the data, that's like at the IP level, right? Yeah, it is. Okay, so that's a peer of IP even. So that's a different envelope even from IP, and this is the one that has it inside. If you ever actually get into this stuff and you start to look at the diagrams of it, There's a book called TCP/IP Illustrated. I'm going to mention it. It's really dated, but this is how I learned about all this. So TCP/IP Illustrated Volume 1 and 2. I actually have these books. I think they probably still hold to the test of time. So these are really great at. I mean, this is one of the books I used to read on public transportation just to understand how everything worked, And I'm trying to look for the diagram. They do have a diagram of what the envelope looks like, what the packet itself looks like. Another really fun thing to do is to actually trace the packets that are traveling on your network. We're not going to do any of that. There's something called packet sniffers. You can put a packet sniffer on. You can watch every single packet and see what's in it. It's really fun, but it's not beginner boost material. So for that kind of thing, I'll let you go do it. Here we go. So here's what I'm talking about with the envelope. Let's see if we can get this to get a little bit bigger. So that's actually the one I learned. So it tells you how many bytes. So this is what the envelope looks like, right? And it's you can think of it as a bunch of ones and zeros, and it shows you how it's broken up and where it goes and what pieces are where. And if you want to get into the nitty gritty of that and the guts of it, it's really interesting though. I really like that. I like knowing exactly what is flying over those wires, what is flying over those fiber optic cables, what are the ones and zeros, what are they literally, what do they literally look like, instead of, seeing an ad. And Het Tennis is here. Het Tennis knows all of this stuff. Another person is LTN _Bob, who is a professional network instructor. He teaches people to get Cisco certified. So if you want to take the networking thing and go with it, and by the way, the careers in the networking path are prolific, fast to get, and pay very well. There are ascertainment. Please give LTN _Bob a shout out as well. This is one of the things. So becoming a network administrator and the commands we're about to learn, this is one of those things where you can go to a community college for like a year and a half. You can get certified with as a network engineer, and you can make bank like within a year. So if you don't necessarily like writing code or getting into Kubernetes operations or cloud native or even hacking, if you just want a really great tech job with a long and stable future, become a network administrator, because networks are not going anywhere. If anything, they're becoming more complicated, and there's a solid, huge future with very high paying careers in network engineering. I actually seriously used to think about this, and the network engineers in my experience tend to be kind of uppity. I would go to them because I found true story, somebody had actually drywalled in addition, a running server. We don't know if it was on purpose or on accident. And I kept getting inbound pings from this IP address that I didn't know. And I was like, because I used to track all that stuff to see who was hitting me, right? It's a good way to catch hackers. And there was this like random IP address, this random Ethernet address out there that kept hitting me. And I went to my network guys. I said, do you know what this thing is? Because it keeps trying to scan me and run on all these different ports. And they came back, true story. They came back a week later, and I don't know if they lied to me or if they made it up. I honestly don't know. In fact, we found some apocryphal stuff on the internet. To this day, I don't know if I was being trolled or if they were serious, but they told me that there was something that had been walled in, and that and you can do an internet research search on this. And we did this last time, and somebody found that there was actually a story about this. And so I'm kind of thinking that maybe the IP guys in my upper 50s that kind of had the shackles from my eyes taken away, and that maybe they were just making fun of me. But I was reporting that this thing was like coming in, it was contacting me, and they told me that there was a machine there that had been doing it. So you can actually see. So let's look at the first thing. We've been talking about how to go out and see things out, and we'll come back and do nmap for that as well. But how do you look at what's coming into your system? What's coming into your machine? What is trying to connect to you? And so if you're on Linux, you can use netstat for that. And there's lots of netstat commands. You have to read them all. You can just do man netstat and read about it. We're not going to read them all. We have, I mean, there's a lot of commands, right? So my favorite is netstat tuna, and because it's easy to remember, and I cannot even tell you what all the things mean. Oh, the N I know gets rid of the IP address. So I mean the DNS. So let's actually take the N out for a second. So this shows you. You see how much longer that command took? Why did that command take longer, my friends? Why did it take longer? Because rather than having all the numbers, it gave me the service name or the computer name. So in this case, that's the computer DNS name, right? You see some here, localhost. We're going to talk about what localhost is. What is this crazy thing? 0000. That means that it's listening on all of the. So a complication is that you can actually have more than one. Remember, more than one IP address for a house. Yeah. So like you could have. It's as if your house had multiple addresses depending on what system it was on, right? So that's why that's there. In fact, some houses, some computers are given multiple IP addresses, and then the router will say, okay, I'm going to send it to the first one that's available. It's called round robin. And whether it is a DNS thing or it's an IP thing, again, I'm really, really simplifying here. But this is what I want you to, we're not going to go into all the TCP IP states here, but you see these are TCP packets, services, and this is the name of the port that it is. It depends on whether it's inbound or outbound. So here's the local address. Remember I told you about, when you're making an outbound connection, making up a door, an invisible door, and connecting out? That's what this is. So these are connections that have been initiated by this computer, TV, right? And this is what's called the ephemeral port. That was the random port that we just made up so we could go talk out. And we talk out to this destination, IP address in this case. And in this case, there's a domain name that goes with the IP address and then the name of the service. And we're getting the words here based on the Etsy services to see that as opposed to everything else, right? Now, the star means anything, right? Now, this is different, though, because this is a connection where this thing has connected to this thing, and there's an established state, and it's like hanging out. It's like it's an open connection, and now we're going to send it some other thing, right? And in this case, it's a different state, right? So it's like this thing is sitting around this. Well, I have a domain server. I didn't know that. And Postgres SQL, I'm running Postgres on here. I'm running SSH on here, right? These are the names of the services. If I had a web server, I'd have HTTPS here or something. And it says, I am hanging around listening, right? So if you want to know if you're vulnerable, this is really important for you, right? You guys know how to limit it. So I only see the listening ones. Remember this? Grep listen. And there's other fancier ways to do that, but that command right there, everybody should write that down. Because if you want to see if you are being exposed to hackers, now obviously this computer is inside of a local area network, so it's protected. But if it weren't, if I were out on the internet, I could do that command, and this tells me exactly all the inbound attack vectors that somebody could come at. They could try to connect to my SQL server. They could try to connect to my SSH server. They could try to IPP. I don't even know what that is. They could try to connect to, I did not know I was running a domain server. Why would I be running a domain server here? That's very weird. Yeah. And as Head Tennis says, this is a big part of hardening. Hardening a server is turning services off that don't need to be there. I got a quick story on this. So while I was working at Teleport Internet Services in Portland, Oregon, we actually caught a guy who hacked us by coming in as a printer. Very common back in the day. So there was a service that was running unnecessarily because there were no printer connected to it, but there was an inbound service that was listening for incoming requests to print things on the printer, right? And there was a bug in the software that was listening, and because that service at the time, it's not anymore, but at the time it was on by default, and it had not been turned off. And so the hacker saw that was open, looked up in Hacker, Central or wherever for the way to get in there, and then used, a finely crafted packet to get into it and become a printer, and then he broke out of the printer and got root access to the machine that was running the service. And they brought the authorities, they brought the cops in and everything, and they sat there and they put a sniffer, they put his thing watching his TTY, which is, what he's typing, and they sat there and they watched everything he was typing. I'll never forget it. Because I was sitting there watching the cops talk to the network engineers and the operations guys as they watched all the keystrokes from this hacker who came in as a printer. And I still chuckle every time, what's his face? The guy who does Mr. Robot. He does HP. He does advertisements in America for how secure HP printers are, and he's a hacker, and he's talking all about how secure the printers are, because your printer is actually a Linux device, usually either a BSD Unix or a Linux device, and it is on the network, and you can scan it using nmap, which we'll do now, and you can see that it's like wide open. And so one of the most common ways to attack an organization, the most common way is to phish the people that work there. But the second most common way is to see what stuff that they have running that they're not even keeping track of. There's a good chance they're not updating it, so old hacks will work. All right, let's try that same command with the n again, and just so you can see that these things have been... see right here, see localhost? What is localhost? Localhost, my localhost is 20.0.0.53. That's interesting. So 53 is the DNS server. Why do I have a DNS server running over here? I'm kind of curious about that. I did not set that up. So I'm glad I did this. For some reason, Mint automatically installed the DNS server. I don't know why. I got to go look that up and shut that down. Yeah. Yeah, and this is the same. That's like listing on the other. Okay, and then we have .0. So I don't even know what 4.3. That's Postgres. Okay, this is Postgres. I was like scared. I thought maybe I'd been hacked. By the way, if you want to know if you've been hacked, run this, and if you cannot answer the question about every single thing that's listening. I mean, usually if you've been hacked, they will have Trojan, the netstat command, so you can't see this stuff. They'll hide themselves. They'll hide their own tracks by taking the command over so it doesn't show their particular stuff. But if not, you can go in here and you'll see if you can't answer the question, what is that thing doing? Why is it listening? Then you've got something to look up. Like, I have no idea what IPP is. Zolan, listen. Yeah, you're right. Good point. So... I don't know though. This isn't localhost right here. This is the local area network. So that would be exposed to the outside world. Okay, so let's talk about localhost versus yeah. What if Trojan changes netstat result is a way it's not visible here? Yeah, that's what I was just saying. Yeah, it looks like that comment came in after the fact. Yeah, so when you get hacked, all of the stuff that allows a hacker to be found are usually taken away. So there's ways to get around that, by the way, and we're not going to get into that here, but it fundamentally involves /proc. You go into /proc and places like that, or in /dev, and you look directly at the files using tools that are very likely to not be hacked. That's how I caught the hacker who got on my system. Is I looked, they had Trojan the ls command so that it didn't show their files, and instead I used find, and we're going to do find next week. And I'll tell that story in full next week. And I was able to find their rat's nest and everything because they didn't expect me to use find because they thought I was just going to use ls like a noob. And I was able to find them. So, but netstat is one that usually gets Trojan pretty easily. So, but one of the things you could do though, is you probably should just run this, whether you think you've been hacked or not, and answer the question, what is this stuff? And if you put the n back in, it'll give you a better hint, or take it out, I mean. It'll give you a better hint, but otherwise, I got an SSH server listening. We already talked about that. I have no idea what is IPP. What is the IPP Linux service? I'm going to ask ChatGPT because I don't know. I probably should know this. IPP, Internet Printing Protocol. What did I just say? What did I just say about being hacked through the printer port? Because you didn't know it was on. What did I just say? My Linux Mint by default is running a service that's supposed to be able to print stuff, assuming that I set up my system to connect to a printer, which it's not doing right now. That's pretty damn terrifying. I don't want that on. I got to figure out how to turn that off. Here, ChatGPT. Add -P to see the listening process. Okay, yeah. Yeah, they didn't used to have P, but they do now. So, this is new, by the way. I'm glad you reminded me of that. So if you add, so I'm going to be doing tune-up now. Now I'm going to be doing tune-up or tulip. Tulip is another one, right? So ChatGPT for internal we talked about last week. So check it out. So I have Spotify. So now mystery solved. These things that I don't know, those are inbound connections. That's Spotify. Why is Spotify running listeners on my machine? Why the hell is Spotify running listeners on my machine? That is not secure. There's no way that's going to be secure. That's listening on all the IP addresses, including local and others. OmniOrb. I have no idea what that is. Go look up what that is. I have no idea. Yeah, but isn't that kind of fun? I mean, okay, so we know enough. I could go down this rabbit hole all day, and we're already over time. So this is kind of fun. By the way, let's say your machine has lots of listeners. Yes, of course, yes. But look, you don't have to do the grep. You can actually do. Watch, this is going to go forever. Look at that, man. Okay, so that's everything, right? But here we have UDP and UDP v6. Some of them are inbound. All right, so here's practice. Can you tell which stuff is coming in and what stuff is going out? You should be able to do that. You should be able to look at that and know, right? So I'm seeing here, MDNS. What the hell is that? Spotify, Chrome. All right, so this is an outbound connection. Oh, this is a good example. Look at this one. So UDP. Why is Chrome using UDP? What is it using UDP for? Since when did Chrome start using UDP for stuff? Is it quick? Is it really quick? Damn. I see. Quick is a new version of the HTTP protocol. It's like a different server. Chrome has got some interesting things that it does besides HTTP to make things faster. Netstat Peanut. You like Netstat Peanut? I don't know about that one. I'm gonna try Peanut. Damn. That is a big one. Look at all that fun stuff. Peanut. Netstat Peanut, Netstat Tulip, Netstat Tuna. I'll take the N out. Wow. Yeah. TPUA. Yeah, there's a bunch of good ones here. So anyway, I am getting sucked into rabbit holes. Speaking of rabbit holes, how do I know what is listing from these numbers? Well, you look at the from address and then the to address, right? This is from, this is to. If the from address is you, the name of your machine, or zeros, or or localhost, then you know that that's either from you going out or from you, and it's if it has these things here, that means it's listening probably. So these are established TCP. Yeah. It's kind of deprecated. I know. Okay, so are we going to say this now? So I don't know it, but there's a new command called ss, and here's the thing. This is my first opportunity to say why I still think netstat matters. Does ss work on BSD? No. It doesn't. You want me to prove it? It doesn't work on BSD. Yeah. It does not work. Netstat works no matter what. So during this conversation, you're going to have people hit you with tons of newfangled tools, and that is totally fine for you to learn those tools. But progressive learning, friends, I'm going to say it again, progressive learning. Don't learn NeoVim before learning Vim. Don't learn Vim before learning VI, because you need to be compatible with all the systems out there. And netstat is on everything. Netstat is on Windows, Mac, PC, AIX, Unix, Solaris, everything, right? Same thing with another one, ifconfig. Okay, Now, ifconfig is a really, 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 really dated command. It is. It's really dated, but you know what? It works on BSD. The modern equivalent for ifconfig is IPA, and that's all I'm going to say, IP. The IP command is prettier, and it's more customizable and stuff. All right, so you found machines without netstat that only have SS now? Well, there you go. Now you know about it. If you need to use that, I think you need to learn both. If you want to be good on BSD Unix, then you got to learn netstat and all the other ones. So, anyway, now I look. We're not going to fight about which one to use. I'm just telling you they're both there. All right. So, netstat, it doesn't, is a thing. By the way, on ipconfig is the command on Windows. It's almost exactly the same as ifconfig, but it's the Windows version. All right, next thing. We got to move faster than this. So we're not going to do nmap today, but I want you to read about nmap. All right, I'm just going to tell you that it exists. But instead of nmap, wouldn't it be cool if you could see all the running processes on someone else's computer? Wouldn't that be cool? Well, you can do that. So your first fun thing of the day, type into your web browser Shodan, SHODAN.io. Shodan.io search engine. Is your firewall? Yes. Yeah, setting up your firewall. We're not going to talk about setting up firewalls right now. Look, if you're using a standard browser, a standard NetGear router or something like that, and you've connected to the internet, you have a firewall already. So you probably don't need to mess with that. And we're not going to cover that in the boost. That stuff is in Home Lab Init. But we are going to show you how to look up everything. Let's say I want to see everybody who's running a Minecraft server. I'm going to go to Shodan.io, the Google of Internet of Things. And this is going to search the entire internet database of all of the services that are running Minecraft servers. And in case you're wondering, you can connect to some of these things. UFW is another one, yeah. So this is an IP address. You know what that is now, right? There's the domain name that's been given to that. You could actually, I'm not going to do it because it's technically qualify as hacking, but it tells you exactly what the ports are. And you can actually fire up your Minecraft server. We've done this before. We did this on the stream like 3 years ago. We would just randomly find. I have a lifetime membership to Shodan, by the way, and you don't have to buy. If you pay for it, you can get more access to different things. You would be surprised. You can go here and you can find devices. You can find security cameras that have no security at all. You can just go open them up and watch them. They found like the controller website to a dam on here. They reported that on the Vice documentary on Cyberwar. And you can search by IP. Yeah. So you can search it by IP. You can search it by region. One time, I don't know how much I should talk about. Sometimes it's just fun to go over here. It makes you feel like a hacker. One time there was somebody in India who left their Windows desktop sharing service on so they could get to their Windows desktop from anywhere. And I'm like sitting there in bed next to my wife while she was reading her book. I'm like, hey, look, honey. And I was like connected to his Windows desktop because he had no security at all. He had no security. He put his Windows desktop server just right on the internet. And all I did was search. I was like, okay. And then you can actually search by protocol. So you can find, if you want to find all the idiots who are like doing Windows desktop sharing, just search for all the Windows desktop sharing people. Your search your neighbors. Yeah. Get your local subnet. You can search all your neighbors. You can know exactly what's going on with them. I'm not teaching you how to hack, but I tell you what, this makes it a lot more fun. Maximum players. Look at that. They got the player stats and everything. Want to be hacker? Absolutely. I am. Yeah. I don't hack that much, but it's hardly hacking to just connect to somebody's non-password encrypted, non-password secured, sharing service running, or their Minecraft server. the kids that we connected to me and was streaming. We connected to some random Minecraft server and we just popped up, and they're like, "Hey, welcome to the server." And I'm like, "Hey, it's nice being here. Thank you for the welcome." And we ran around. We ran around and played in their world and everything. And then they were like, I said, and I chatted. And I said, you know that your server is on Shodan. They're like, "What's that?" I said, "Your server's on Shodan. You're like completely unsecured, and I just connected without any authentication." And they went, "Oh," and then they banned me. I told them that they should not put their server completely unauthenticated out there on the internet, because after been running around for like 15 minutes there, Coma's watching what you're doing. Oh, it absolutely is. And anyway, I just thought that was really funny. So I wanted to put this out there to keep networking fun. I find network intrusion probably some of the most fun hacking that you'll ever do. You got to be careful though. If you try to do this, there's something called a honeypot. Even more fun than hacking somebody's Minecraft server that you don't really have to hack, is setting up a honeypot for stupid hackers. So there's a project. There's a project for you. There's a project. If you wanna have a blast, we did this in the security camp. You guys want to see? We did this in the security camp. Set yourself up. I'm not even kidding. Set yourself up a honeypot and stick it out on the cloud so it doesn't violate your security, right? Set yourself up a honeypot and just watch all the stupid hackers and bots hack you. Just to watch it. It's absolutely crazy. It's terrifying and fun at the same time. I'm trying to find you the pictures of the hacker. We actually had, it took us 15 minutes to be hacked. We put a honeypot up, and if you want a honeypot, just put the Metasploit image, by the way. Metasploit image has got every vulnerability and Metasploit in it all at the same time. Yeah. So that was a thing. Does it look like I'm finding it now? I don't know what's going on. Where to go? It must be my SKILSTAK. This is all the old SKILSTAK, by the way. So I'm trying to find, that was back when we did Minecraft is a great way to get kids to learn secure operations. So anyway, I'm going to do Instagram, and you know what? You can sue me. You can fast forward this part if you don't want to see it. I want to show you because this guy in the camp got hacked within like 10 or 15 minutes. Instagram. Is this it? I think this might be it. I'm just give me a second. I'm gonna find it. Oh, there he is. There he is. Watch. Yeah, I guess. Here we go. That took 15 minutes to be hacked. That is an S-trace against the software that the rootkit that they hacked us with and put on our system. And then we turned S-trace on and watched everything about what it was doing. There's the command. We turned S-trace on and we sat there and spied. It's kind of fun. Watch it. It'll actually do something. Pulls down a package. That's what all the binary data is. It'll write out a package to run. It'll ship that data that it runs off to the upstream, and then it will delete itself. It deletes itself. It deletes the bundle that it downloaded. But because we're S-tracing it, the idiot that hacked us with that, I could easily trace all the stuff about where they were going to. So unless the system, and we could look up who we connected to, that's what, see all these crazy letters are. We could go back and go look at that. So even more fun than intrusion, than finding opportunities to go into, idiots' networks. It's even more fun to put a honeypot out there that's got one or more vulnerabilities on it, see how fast it gets hacked, and then try to figure out where the hackers are coming from, try to shut them down, try to hack them on their own system, because usually if they've hacked like that, the guy that I caught, he'd actually hacked a football jock at Purdue, no kidding, and I was able to use his backdoor. I don't know how much I want to talk about that, but it's just so much fun. It's just fun. So the takeaway from this is hacking is fun. Hacking to learn is fun. Hacking to learn is fun. I'm not even gonna lie. It's like really fun because you get to learn about how systems work and everything. But more importantly, that's how networks work. Is it good to get to scan your external IP? Yeah, it is. Usually you should probably be regularly scanning your external IP, and you'll see whether what you're being exposed to. You'll see how much you're being protected by your internet service provider. Um, yeah, and you'll there's a whole bunch of things that you can see. And strace is a product. Okay, we don't know about we're gonna use strace when we do process management. So don't worry about strace for now. Strace is a tool for watching what the running program is doing at a very 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 fine grained level of detail. So you can see every exact thing it's doing. And when we talk about process management in a couple of weeks, running in programs and watching them and seeing what they're doing, um, that's why the dash P. I'm glad somebody mentioned dash P. When you run this actually was not always available in netstat. I used to always complain. You used to have to use another program for that. But it used to be you didn't know what program was actually running, and now you can actually see the process, and then you can trace the process to see what it's doing. So if you're like, why is this thing communicating? And you want to see exactly what it is communicating, like you want to sniff its communications and you want to see what it's actually sending, then you could run strace on this process and see every detail of what it's doing. And that's what we were doing in that video. So a lot of fun stuff, probably more than you need for basic networking, but it makes it so much more fun to talk about it when we get to talk to it in a hacker context. So a couple other commands here. I'm kind of all over the place, but let's just wrap up here. A couple of other basic little things that we'll fill in the gaps for. So, if you in order to get an IP, in order to get a name, a DNS name, you would need to register a DNS name. And we're not going to do this until we get into, we're going to do least amount of web development necessary. And we're going to go to places like Namecheap, and we're going to talk about how to check for domains like, foo.com, which is already taken. And it'll tell you whether it's available or not. And we're going to talk about registering a domain name and having that go with your IP address so you can have your own site. So you don't need to know about that. We're not going to talk about running your own DNS server. So inside of your house or organization, you can have your own fancy DNS names. It's pretty fun. But the next best thing you can do is you can edit the file etc hosts. So if you know you're going to be using an IP number on your network, this is a reserved IP number on my router, then you can go here and you can put that number. Even if you don't get the same one every time, you can just keep coming in here and changing it. It's kind of a poor person's way of doing it. And then you see localhost, right? And we used to have a mat that said there's no place like 127.0.0.1 outside our door. Think about it. It was a doormat to our house, and it said there's no place like 127.0.0.1. lsof is the other command, yeah. And let's go ahead and list it. I wasn't going to mention it, but let's list it anyway. So lsof used to be the command that you would use instead of netstat-p. Yeah, there's no place like 127.0.0.1. And that's a really, really old joke. Because it used to be instead of localhost, the other common thing to see here would be if you want to like go really retro, you can, instead of having localhost, whoops, I have to sudo that. My super secret password. So you can have localhost. You can put home here. There's no place like home, right? So if you're a really old school retro person from the 90s and the internet, you remember that this used to be called home in addition to localhost. And so that's the joke. Now you'll never forget it. There's no place like 127.0.0.1. And the entire 127 domain, that means everything there and after, including .1.tv and whatever, is all reserved. That's all reserved just for your private use. It will never conflict with anything on the internet. There's another couple of IP ranges that are like that. So the 192.168.1, I believe it is. I think it's just that. Is this a dash 24? I don't know if you can use the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 and then the 200 or whatever. That's called the IP range. That's what the /24 and the /8 were about. And we're not going to get into that, but that just means how much of those, how many addresses you get to use. And it's a real rabbit hole to get into IP subnetting. If you want to go down that rabbit hole, you're welcome to do it, but just know that that's what's involved, right? And you can look up IP subnet mapping and all that jazz. I am not going to cover that at all. And loopback, never heard it use this home. Yeah, it was really, really old. I mean, like really old. So anyway, that's the mask. You can look at that. But if you wanted to add in, you know, if I wanted to have an easier name, I could have a name in here. Oops. I could have another name in here. I could have like foo, right? Now I can SSH to foo. Uh-oh. It's like, you changed the name on us. What the hell? You changed the name of foo. Are you sure you want to connect? I'm like, okay, because SSH is trying to protect me there. Yeah. Yeah, and so now see how we're now in HPZ 640, right? But it made the connection. So another couple things we need to talk about. So the .ssh/config file. SSH, I need to show you this. So you're going to start to see entries in SSH config where you can actually add additional hosts and stuff. I don't know if it's worth doing one of those. I don't know if it's actually worth doing one. But now you can ping, by the way, I can ping home, see? See what I'm saying? I can ping foo. Basically, you can add them. But when you change something in Etsy host, and that works for Windows too, by the way, when you change it in Etsy host, it only affects programs that are running from that computer. Nothing else on your network knows that name that you gave it. But if you're dealing with numbers and you don't want to type the numbers all the time, as a beginner, it's kind of nice to have that knowledge because you can just go in and change that pretty easily. Another thing you can do is just add an entry to SSH config, but that only affects SSH. So I'm just going to mention that and leave that there. I'm not going to go much further with that. And what else we got? So, yeah. What else we got? LSOF. LSOF is just a way of listing all of the resources on your system and mapping them to ports. So as I said before, when you do netstat-p, it used to be if you wanted to map a TCP/IP port to its process that's running it, that's listening, you used to have to run this. You don't have to do that anymore. So, but it's good to know about it in case you don't have the netstat-p, which you would not have on a lot of versions of BSD, I think. Anyway, whois is a way of, all right, so before we leave, wait. We have whois, we have dig. There are so many of these. We have nslookup and dig, and there's actually a new one now. I don't want to see if it's running. Nope. So it wouldn't matter anyway. I'm running SSH with the password as password. I'm depending on my local area network a lot. So here we go. What was I going to show? I forgot what I was doing. What was I doing before I was interrupted? Dig. So like if I wanted to look up the IP address for SKILSTAK, there you go. Right? Now, believe it or not, this a lot of times this will actually also work on IP addresses. Not always, but sometimes it'll work on IP addresses. So let's say you get a connection and you're like, who is that connected to me? I want to know who they are. And you can do that. And that'll give you something here. But even more importantly, you can do, oh man, I wonder what ChatGPT is going to do. Where is IP located? I haven't tried this before. United States. What? That's cool. So, I'm running a preview. No, I don't. I don't ever do that. No, you can do it. That's a web development question. Um. So yeah. All right. So anyway, you can actually you can enter the question like that in Google or something, and it will show you where the IP address is from. But another thing you can do is if you want to know about an organization, and I could seriously be doxing myself right now, so I'm going to try it anyway. I don't remember if my stuff is protected or not. Most most of the when you register an internet domain name, in the old days you used to have to put in. We're going to talk about this when we do web development, but you used to have to put very sensitive information that anybody could see in order to qualify. And sudo apt install whois, and whois is and you can still do this, and this will show you. I'm going to go to the top here. This tells you, yeah, redacted for privacy. Thank God, finally. It didn't usually do that. You can actually, but you can learn a lot about somebody here. So, like if you know the domain name, or you want to attack someone, or you want to social engineer them, you can learn a lot from a domain name entry in whois. First of all, you can see that I'm registered with Namecheap. That means that that Namecheap is the company that I use to host this particular one. This is the registrar. So if somebody's abusing you and taking you over, you can call the registrar and complain. This stuff used to all be public information, and I can't tell you how glad I am that it's not anymore. It's funny because they would send you an email all the time that says, make sure it's up to date. And I'm like, I'm not putting actual information there. So just in case you're wondering, I very rarely will ever put real information in here, even though I'm breaking the register rules by doing that, because this is a really great way to social engineer an organization. You can go in there and find out who the primary technical contact is that manages the DNS domain name user, and you can social engineer them, and then you can do a domain spoofing attack. I mean, that's what Kevin Mitnick would have done. Rest in peace. May he rest in peace. That's exactly what he would have done. And so, again, I told you today was going to be from a hacker perspective, because networking is very that kind of thing. So this tells you that my name servers are nszone.net. You're like, what does that mean? What can I find out from that? Well, I'll tell you right now that you can find something out from this right now. You're like, wait, the name servers are not the same as Namecheap. What the hell? What can I find out about that? Well, let's paste that in and see. What is that about? Oh my God. Okay, we got another registrar here. Let's go look at what the entry is for this. Name.com. Who is name.com? DNS ns1.net. I wonder who that is. So let's ask ChatGPT. Who owns? Let's see. What company owns this? Let's see if we can find out. Is NS1? Oh, that didn't help. What company uses name servers ns1.net? Oh, they're not going to tell us. Interesting. Yeah, and Namecheap is good. That's interesting. That's good to know. You can't figure out where I'm actually hosting my DNS entries. Yeah, that if you wanted to attack me, if you wanted to take over my domain name, you'd need to find the company that is using that name server address hosting on which I'm being hosted. And so far, you can't find it. I'm sure if you kept looking, you could probably find it. But again, I'm thinking like a hacker here. How would you learn information about an organization? So here we go. Here's another one. Dig is not even the modern one anymore. It's been replaced by something else, and I don't know what it is. What is the name of the one that's replaced Dig? I use Dig and nslookup. nslookup and Dig work everywhere. But this tells you that I have 2 IP addresses, which is kind of cool, actually. that means that I have a redundancy. I have round robin redundancy for hosting my website, which is currently hosted on Netlify. Okay. NS1 is owned by IBM. Yeah, but it's not. I'm not on IBM. That's what I'm trying to say. So it didn't give up. It didn't give up where my actual register, my DNS servers are running, which I love. I love that it didn't do that. So anyway, if you want to know what an IP address is, you can look it up. Why would you want to do that? Well, let's say you're trying to figure out if your internet, sometimes your DNS server for your internet service probably will go down, and it takes a longer time to give you a number to go with that name, right? It's kind of annoying. It's a system that's very fragile. It's still one of the most fragile internet systems out there, and it's a lot of times it's really slow. So what you could do instead is you could say, let's say it's not working, right? And if you, it's also been localized, so you could do this. You can see that Google has got several IP addresses because they're dealing with a lot of traffic, and that any one of those things will answer. And so when you connect into Google, you're connecting to more than one of these. And this idea of having multiple IP addresses per given domain name is very common. And if you go on to do cloud native or web development, but particularly Kubernetes and cloud native and stuff like that, the idea of having multiple machines effectively, not really, but multiple machines or multiple addresses pointing to the same service as a way to provide high availability, HA they call it. That's a very common thing. So you're going to see a lot of that. Yeah, I'm going to upload it to YouTube. Yep. Okay, so we're almost done here with covering all the fun stuff. Again, the goal today has been to get you enough to go look at things, right? And in fact, I've covered everything here. Just make sure you understand SSH config. Now that we've talked about IPs and names and stuff like that, when you read about SSH config, you'll understand it better because it's going to ask you to put in a host name or an IP, and now you know what they're talking about, okay? So we did not do that earlier, but I did want to mention it. There are a number of old protocols out there. I'm going to add IPP to there. These are protocols to be aware of. So if somebody is using FTP, it is the company name. MS1 is the company name. Interesting. I did not know that. So Telnet, it should never, ever be used. Telnet is basically secure shell without encryption. Ever, ever, ever use it. You can still use it for some fun things. Like you can use Telnet here. Telnet to watch Star Wars. You guys want to watch Star Wars with Telnet? You want to watch Star Wars with Telnet really quick? Yeah, for FTP, WFTP is probably the biggest hack in history. The guys who hacked it actually hacked the source code and got it on the distribution sites while still passing a checksum validation. Can you believe that? I mean, that is just absolutely amazing to me. But they actually managed it. Telnet is back in the day. If you read anything with Telnet on it, now you know it's like ancient. Because we used to use Telnet because there was no secure shell, and it was a different time, my friends. It was a very insecure, fun time to be a hacker, though. It was a really fun time to be a hacker, because there was just so much stuff out there. Why isn't it happening? Yeah, sometimes it's that's a good point. Connecting to old services like mail servers. Remember I told you about Hello and all that, right? Sometimes you can use Telnet, but there's actually a better tool for that kind of thing. And I'm just going to say, look this up too. Look up netcat or NC. It's also called NC. This is one of the main tools of hackers. And you can make, do I need to press F? Why am I press? Yeah, NC. Yeah, there's like so many things. Using the netcat tool, you can run a service and have it masquerade. You can just do so many amazing things with it, particularly as a hacker. You can basically make your own servers that do whatever you want on the fly if you can get netcat on the system. So I did F. What did I miss? It's not doing it. It's not doing it. It won't work. I'm like a regular user now. I'm talking like a regular user. I did that. Oops. Why isn't it working? Telnet. I must have taken it down. I've already done all of that. You're suggesting I do a video about my setup? How about 12 videos since May 4th? We have new people in the chat who don't know about the boost. Let's see. Long time ago, there's things going on. Yes. Hey, Black Mouse, how are you? So let's see. Suggest a video for doing things. Yeah, don't use Telnet. Don't use Telnet. But I'm kind of sad because it looks like Star Wars went away. Yep. Star Wars went away, my friends. I don't know what's up with that. Yeah. I'm sad. Telnet to see Star Wars. Maybe ChatGPT knows more than I do. It's FOSS. It's FOSS. I'm sure they took it down. Cyber. Oh, this is where you have to install it. Install the Telnet client. Use Telnet. Like, this is not a critical thing. It's just fun. It works. It works on my computer. Really? That's what you're gonna give me? You're gonna give me that, huh? Yeah. Oh, nice, Black. Yeah, Kate's stuff is very profitable. I'm not cool like you. Mine doesn't work. I don't know. Maybe my network is screwed up. Or something. I'm sure it's something I'm doing wrong. What if it's Tmux? Yeah. I wonder. Is it Tmux? Could it be Tmux? Could it be Tmux? Okay. Oh, that's not it. It's a separate terminal. I'm doing this without Tmux to see if it's... I have a feeling it's Tmux. Which it should not be. That's going to be annoying. Nope, that's not it. Can I ping the address? Yeah, we've talked about Kevin Mitnick a lot, actually. Yep, we did. We talked about him last week. That's why I referred to it. Ping. I feel denied. I feel denied. You don't need a port with Telnet. No, you don't. You can, but you don't need it. At least not for this particular thing. It says here, just Telnet to the thing. Yeah. No, you don't. You absolutely don't need the port. You don't. See here? Boom. Unless they're running on a specific port, it should use the standard port. And actually, a little bit of a quiz. How would I know what the default Telnet port is? Pause the video. What command can I use to find the default port for Telnet? You know everything to do this. Pause the video and quiz yourself. grep Telnet etc services. There you go. Right? It could be DNS resolution, but then the ping wouldn't have worked. So that doesn't follow. Right? If I'm getting immediate pings that are resolving DNS, that means my system is resolving DNS. That would be really weird for Telnet to not use the system DNS resolver. I mean, it's possible, but it's be very, very weird. Yep, something happening. Telnet over SSL. My machine is just too damn secure. It's not going to work. Oh well, I feel denied. I'll figure that out another time. So that is pretty much the end of this. There's lots of commands here and stuff. I'm not doing UFW status. No, I'm not. You want me to dox my firewall status. I'm not doing that. Plus, we're not going to talk about firewalls. You should not be running a firewall on your Linux machine. You shouldn't. You should be using your local area network to protect you, unless you are on a laptop and you're going to go onto a public network of some kind. In that case, you probably do want to do that. We are not going to go in. Okay, fine. I'll tell you what. I'll list it into the commands you should learn about. Yeah, we'll learn about this. It's not even UFW everywhere. We need IP tables too, and I don't. If we start getting into IP tables and UFW and all that stuff, they're gonna their brains are gonna melt. So, because it's like too much stuff. It's fundamental, but I mean, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it matters. And we're gonna go ahead and add it. So, look, I'll put it here so you can go do your own research on it. Okay. If you don't know what a firewall is, do we need to talk about firewalls? I guess we should talk about firewalls. I'll fix this document. Firewalls. All right. What's a firewall? A firewall is a piece of software that sits between the device on the one side and the other side. In order for a firewall to work, it has to have two connections to the network. On the one side, and sometimes it can be the same connection, but usually it's not. So on the one side, there's a connection to, let's see, images of firewalls. So there's a nice happy picture. We can use this. Oh my God, are you gonna really kill my eyes like that? We're gonna protect your business. Security firewall. Okay, so on the one side you have a firewall, and that's why I call it a firewall, right? And then you have this, and most of the people's encountering a firewall is because it's getting in their way because they can't play games or something on their Windows machine, right? So the idea of a firewall is it doesn't care about anything. It just blocks everything. And we also didn't talk about NAT. Okay, I'm not going to talk about NAT. If you want to know about NAT, go watch the video where we install the virtual machine. You hear me on that? If you want to understand NAT, go watch that video. Because we talk about why you have to have NAT versus bridged, or reverse that, if you're going to have a virtual machine. And I'm not going to say anything more about NAT today. It just, basically, NAT allows all of the stuff on your local area network to connect to the internet reliably. And then when that stuff comes back to a single IP address, the router remembers it. It remembers it. It caches it in memory, and it's like, oh, you go here. And it sends it to the right place. That's oversimplification, but that's exactly what's happening. And the firewall is another piece of this puzzle. Yeah, I know. That's a very deep rabbit hole. And I just want you to know the words exist, okay? So please don't stress if you don't want to get into it. I just want you to know they exist. Honestly, as a beginner, you just need to know what a firewall is. And all it does is block traffic from the network, period, right? Usually a firewall is blocking bad people from the outside coming in to your home network, right? They're hitting your router or your internet service provider, and they're trying to get in, and they can't because the firewall blocks it, right? Even if you have computers on the inside of that network that are listening on a port, and if they didn't have the firewall, those people could get to it, right? So the firewall is a safe way to control access to your network. And so that is one of those things where, you want to be able to get access to it. Now, the reverse is also true, right? So if you want to have additional security, instead of blocking all the stuff coming in, you can also block stuff that you don't want to allow out. Now, why would you want to do that as a beginner? And this is where people get mad, and then they turn their firewall off. I do it all the time. So what they'll do is they'll want to go play a game, right? And particularly on Windows will pop up and it'll say, I'm sorry, you can't play a game. Do you want to allow this application to talk to the internet? And you're like, yeah, okay. And the reason for that is because Windows has so much problems with getting viruses. Once a virus gets onto your system, what's the first thing it does? Once your system has been infected with a virus or a bot, what's the very first thing it's going to do? You remember that thing where we're looking for listen, right? It's going to phone home. It's going to phone home to wherever it goes. So if you want to catch hackers, if you want to see if you've been hacked in a really bad way, turn your log all of the outbound requests from every possible thing on your computer. Not just all the stuff that's listening for inbound requests. That stuff, that's stupid because you got firewall's going to block the inbound requests. But once your machine has been hacked, it'll fire up a backdoor, is what it's called. And that if they're stupid, they'll leave the backdoor on so you can see it. If it's a stupid hacker, right? They'll leave it on, but most of the time they won't. That video that I showed you with strace running, that is some malware that downloads its payload, so it's not on disk at all. It downloads its payload, temporarily creates a whole bunch of files so that they don't get picked up by tripwire or anything. And then those things dial out just like any other user on the system, just like you. Because usually the firewall rules going out are very permissive because, hey, we trust everything on our internal network, so we don't care about the stuff going out. So these little malware, hacks, they get all their critical data, including, they can be watching your keystrokes on the system sometimes. This is why it's so dangerous because you might think, well, I encrypted my password and stuff. Yeah, but if you've got malware on your system and you are typing actual passwords, it will log those keystrokes into a file, and then it will phone home and send all those keystrokes up to some person up on the internet, right? And so the Windows and it's not the default on Linux, but if you want it to be, you can make the firewall, the outbound connections, very finicky. You say, look, I don't want anything talking out except for this application is allowed to talk out. This application is allowed to talk out. This application is allowed to talk out, because that way, even if you get hacked, then that outbound stuff, unless it hacks your firewall rules, which it probably has access to, if it's, then, it can't go out. So that's all you need to know about firewall. A firewall is just a way to protect you from yourself and from mistakes. And, like if I had a firewall, it would actually, right now, a firewall could be protecting me from somebody hacking my printer port, right? Or connecting to my SSH. Right now, the only thing protecting me from somebody on the internet connecting to my streaming machine with password, which is totally stupid, but for the sake of streaming, it's actually safer for me to do that than to use an actual password because I'd be typing it all the time. And the only thing protecting me right now is my firewall. And the firewall from my internet service provider. If you were able to break past that thing, which you can't, I'm not challenging you, but if you were, then you could do that. That would be a way that you could come at me. But I promise you, if you do that, you won't like the result. Remember that thing I said about honeypots? Mm-hmm. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's more entertaining to set up honeypots and destroy hackers that are trying to hack you than it is, because, hey, man, they tried to hack me, officer. Seriously, if you want to entertain yourself in the hacking area, I'm just telling you, it is so much more fun. It's very dangerous. You got to be careful because you don't know who you're dealing with. But it is so much more fun to set up a honeypot and hack a hacker who's already tried to hack you and legitimately tried to hack you. They've already started the fight, man. That is way more fun than initiating hacks against totally innocent idiots on Shodan.io running Minecraft servers. Set up an anonymous FTP server and watch how long it happens. Yeah. So we got some security people in my chat and Twitch right now, and they're all in agreement that that is really, really kind of fun. From Telnet, blinking lights. Yes. Here to define Vuln services. Yes. Yep. After you bypass the final. Yep. All right, everybody. That is all I have for today. I appreciate your support as usual. Do the sub and thing. I'm going to be back tonight doing some dancing, and we've been doing all kinds of fun stuff. I'm not going to disable my firewall. No. That's why I told you I'm not going to touch my firewall. No, I am not disabling my firewall, even if it means I am not able to see Star Trek or whatever, Star Wars. Bye, YouTube.